Has it ever happened to you that you walk out of an argument feeling insulted, overpowered, or proven wrong? And later, when the moment is gone, your mind suddenly becomes sharp. You think, I should have said this right there. That one line would have shut him down. Why didn't I think of it then? That regret isn't coincidence. It's not bad luck. It's lack of preparation. Most people don't lose arguments because they're weak. They lose because their mind freezes under pressure. Emotions rise, clarity drops, and words abandon them at the worst moment. But by the end of this video, those regrets end. You will understand the art of savage reply. Not cheap insults, not loud aggression, but cold, calculated responses that land with precision. You don't reply to a brick with emotions or explanations. You reply to a brick with a stone. In this monologue, you'll learn the same savage reply techniques used by politicians, actors, and high-level public figures. Replies that instantly flip power, end conversations, and make the other person look foolish without you raising your voice. These replies don't just help you win arguments. They make you look intelligent, composed, and mentally superior. I've organized these principles after studying interviews, debates, movies, podcasts, and real power dynamics where words are weapons and silence is strategy. From this moment forward, you won't think of comebacks later. You'll deliver them on impact. If you're ready to never be verbally cornered again, comment "stone, not brick" below. Stay focused, because the next section reveals how power actually speaks. Number 1. Power never explains itself. Understand this before anything else. The moment you start explaining yourself in an argument, you have already stepped into weakness. Explanation is submission disguised as logic. Powerful people don't rush to justify, clarify, or defend. They let others do the talking, and the talking becomes self-incrimination. Most men fail in arguments not because they lack intelligence, but because they panic when challenged. They start stacking reasons, stories, emotions, facts. They think more words mean more strength. In reality, more words mean more leaks. Every extra sentence is an opening. Every explanation is a rope handed to your opponent. Power speaks differently. Power is slow. Power is selective. Power answers only what it wants to answer. When someone attacks you verbally, their goal is not truth, it is control. They want to pull you into their emotional frame, make you reactive, defensive, eager to prove something. Once that happens, you are no longer the hunter, you are the hunted. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The man who controls perception controls reality. And perception is shaped not by what you say, but by how little you need to say. Here is your first savage principle. Never address every accusation. That is a trap designed for insecure minds. Choose one point, only one, and dismantle it calmly. Or better yet, don't dismantle it at all. Question it. A well-placed question is more destructive than a passionate rebuttal. When you ask, "Is that really your best argument?" you don't sound angry. You sound bored. And boredom from a calm man is humiliating. It signals superiority without aggression. The other person starts to overtalk, overjustify, overreach. They dig their own grave while you stand still. Most people argue like beggars. They want approval. They want agreement. They want to be understood. You must remove that desire entirely. The moment you stop needing validation, your replies change automatically. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. Your tone flattens, your face relaxes, your words shorten. And suddenly, the same insults that once rattled you now bounce off harmlessly. This is masculine stoicism in practice, not silence for weakness, but silence as dominance. Another deadly tactic. Let pauses do the damage. When someone throws an insult or challenge at you, don't answer immediately. Pause. Let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Humans are terrified of silence because silence forces self-awareness. In that gap, their confidence starts leaking. When you finally speak, keep it surgical. One sentence, maybe two. Never emotional, never rushed. Calm delivery makes even an average line feel lethal. Remember, people don't fear loud men, they fear controlled men. You must also learn to detach your ego from the exchange. Ego is what makes men argue for the sake of winning instead of positioning. You are not there to prove intelligence, you are there to establish hierarchy. Sometimes the most savage reply is refusing to play at all. A dismissive nod, a slight smile, a "that's interesting," followed by silence. Nothing enrages a person more than realizing they cannot move you. Emotional invulnerability is psychological power. Politicians and elite operators use this constantly. They redirect, they reframe, they downplay attacks as irrelevant. They don't chase accusations. They make accusations feel small. When someone attacks your character, respond as if they attacked something insignificant. When someone questions your ability, respond as if the question itself reveals their ignorance. This flips the power dynamic instantly. You are no longer defending, you are evaluating them. Here's a brutal truth most won't accept. The goal of a savage reply is not to destroy the other person. It is to destroy their confidence. Once confidence collapses, words collapse with it. People with no confidence talk too much, repeat themselves, get louder. You stay quiet. You stay composed. You let their unraveling speak for you. That contrast is devastating. From now on, stop thinking like a participant in arguments. Think like a judge. Judges don't interrupt emotionally. They observe, they weigh, they speak only when necessary. When you adopt this mindset, your presence alone changes how people address you. They become careful, measured, because they sense you are not easily moved. If this mindset resonates with you, if you're ready to stop explaining and start commanding, comment, "I don't explain, I decide," below. Make it public. Seal the identity. Number 2, turn insults into traps. Here's where weak men react and powerful men dominate. When someone insults you, your instinct is to strike back immediately. That instinct is emotional, and emotion is exactly what the attacker wants. Insults are not weapons. They are bait. And the moment you bite, the power shifts away from you. A savage reply doesn't chase the insult. It turns the insult into a trap and lets the other person fall into it willingly. Understand this clearly. Anyone who insults you in an argument is already losing control. Insults are signals of frustration. They mean logic failed, authority failed, persuasion failed. So never treat an insult as a threat. Treat it as information. It tells you exactly where the other person is emotionally exposed. Your job is not to respond with anger, but to magnify their mistake. The first trap is misalignment. When someone insults you, respond as if they said something completely insignificant. Not offended, not defensive, mildly curious, almost amused. A calm, "Is that what you wanted to say?" Or, "That's an interesting way to avoid the point," reframes the insult as a childish detour. Now the audience isn't watching you react, they're watching them justify their loss of composure. This is psychological judo. You use their force against them. Never counter an insult with another insult unless you are absolutely composed. Trading insults is what equals do. You are not trying to be equal. You are trying to rise above. When you stay calm, the other person feels exposed. Their insult hangs in the air, ugly and uncontrolled, while you remain untouched. This contrast alone does more damage than any clever comeback. Another lethal trap is clarification. When someone throws a disrespectful line at you, calmly ask them to repeat it or explain it. What exactly do you mean by that? Forces them into an impossible position. If they repeat it, they look aggressive. If they soften it, they look weak. Either way, they lose. You didn't attack, you didn't defend, you simply let them trip over their own words. Most people underestimate how powerful it is to make someone talk more. The more they talk, the more they reveal their insecurities, their intent, their lack of control. Your savage reply often isn't a statement, it's a door. You open it slightly and let them walk straight into embarrassment. Silence followed by a short question is often deadlier than a paragraph-long rebuttal. Now understand this next principle deeply. Tone beats content. You can say something very average with absolute calm and it will feel devastating. You can say something clever with emotion and it will feel desperate. Masculine power is felt in restraint. The less you need to win the exchange, the more dominant you appear. When someone senses you're unaffected, their attacks escalate. They get louder, sharper, more reckless, and every escalation makes them look smaller. Here's a method politicians and elite negotiators use constantly, reframing the insult as projection. You don't accuse them directly. That would sound defensive. You observe it casually. That sounds like something you've thought about a lot. Or, that's a strong reaction. These lines are neutral on the surface, but psychologically brutal. They imply the insult came from inside them, not from you. Now they feel seen, and being seen without consent is uncomfortable. Never underestimate the power of controlled dismissal. Sometimes the savage reply is a half smile and a quiet, "We're done here." Ending the exchange on your terms denies them closure. Humans crave reaction. When you don't give it, they replay the moment over and over in their head. You move on, they stay stuck. That is real dominance. You must also learn when not to reply. Silence is not weakness when it is chosen. Silence becomes savage when it communicates indifference. If the insult is beneath your standards, let it fall to the floor. No explanation, no correction. People learn quickly what earns your attention and what doesn't. When insults stop getting reactions, they stop being used, at least against you. This is why Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about controlling expression. You still feel the hit. You just don't advertise it. The man who can feel anger without leaking it is dangerous. He chooses when to strike and when to withdraw. That choice is power. Here's a truth most won't like. You don't need to destroy everyone verbally. You only need to establish that you can. Once people sense that you are composed, strategic, and unaffected, they approach you differently. They choose their words more carefully. They hesitate. And hesitation is respect disguised as caution. If you're starting to see how insults can be turned into weapons against the speaker, comment, "I turn attacks into traps," below. Lock the mindset in. Remember, savage replies are not about dominance through volume. They are about dominance through control. You are not loud, you are precise. You don't rush, you don't chase. You let others reveal themselves while you remain unreadable. In the next section, you'll learn how to weaponize calmness itself, how your presence alone can disarm arguments before they even begin. Stay with me. Number 3, calm is the weapon they can't fight. Most people believe power is loud. They think dominance announces itself. That's a lie taught to insecure men to keep them noisy and predictable. Real power is quiet. Real power is controlled. And calm, true, unshakable calm, is the most violent psychological weapon you can carry into any argument. When you remain calm under attack, you break the other person's script. They expect resistance. They expect emotion. They expect you to defend, to counter, to explain. Calm denies them all three. Calm says, "You are not a threat." Calm says, "I am not moved." And nothing enrages an aggressive mind more than realizing it has no effect. Understand this. Calm is not passive. Calm is not softness. Calm is contained force, like a blade that hasn't left its sheath yet. The moment someone realizes you are calm by choice, not because you are confused or weak, but because you are in control, the dynamic shifts. They start speaking faster, louder, more emotionally. They try to provoke something, anything, because silence and composure force them to confront themselves. Here is the psychological law at work. Emotion seeks resonance. When someone throws anger at you and it doesn't echo back, it collapses inward. It turns into embarrassment, self-doubt, frustration. You don't have to insult them. You don't have to outsmart them verbally. You just have to withhold reaction. Their mind does the rest. This is why monks, negotiators, and elite interrogators are trained to regulate breath and posture before speech. The body communicates power before words ever arrive. Slow breathing lowers your voice. Relaxed shoulders signal confidence. Stillness commands attention. If your body is calm, your words carry weight. If your body is tense, even the smartest line sounds insecure. In arguments, people are not listening to logic. They are reading state. They are asking one question subconsciously: who is more grounded right now? The grounded man becomes the authority by default. His words are treated as conclusions. The other man's words start to sound like noise. This is where Stoicism becomes practical, not philosophical. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotion. It's about refusing to let emotion drive behavior. You feel the insult. You feel the challenge. You feel the disrespect. And then you decide whether it deserves expression. Most of the time, it doesn't. Reaction is expensive. Calm is economical. Here's how you weaponize calm in real time. When confronted, slow down physically. Pause before speaking. Lower your voice instead of raising it. Shorten your sentences. Remove emotional adjectives. Speak as if you are commenting on the weather. Neutral, observant, detached. This contrast creates imbalance. The other person feels exposed for caring too much. There is a savage reply that requires no clever wording at all. It's called composed acknowledgement. When someone attacks you, you nod slowly and say, "I hear you." Not agreement, not submission, acknowledgement. It tells them their words landed, but didn't penetrate. They expected resistance. They got containment. Now they don't know where to go next. Another brutal technique is delayed response. Let them finish. Let the silence stretch. Let them feel the weight of their own words. Most people rush to fill silence because silence feels like judgment. When you let silence linger, it forces self-evaluation. By the time you speak, their confidence has already dropped a level. Calm also allows you to choose the battlefield. You don't have to respond to everything immediately. You can say, "That's not the conversation we're having," and redirect, or "We'll come back to that later." This is authority language. It frames you as the one deciding what matters. The other person either follows your frame or looks scattered trying to resist it. Here's something few men realize. Staying calm while someone is disrespectful makes them look unstable. The audience, whether it's one person or many, starts to side with you instinctively. Humans trust the person who appears in control of themselves. They distrust the one who can't regulate emotion. You win without convincing anyone consciously. But calm must be genuine. Fake calm leaks. Forced calm trembles. You cultivate real calm by internalizing one truth. You don't need to win every exchange. You don't need to dominate every conversation. Your value is not decided in arguments. Once you accept that, pressure evaporates. And without pressure, calm becomes natural. This is why men who know their worth are dangerous in debates. They don't rush. They don't chase approval. They are comfortable being misunderstood temporarily because they know time favors composure. They let others burn energy while they conserve it. Eventually, the calmer presence prevails. There's also a darker layer here. Calm makes people reveal more than they intend. When someone realizes they can't provoke you, they often escalate unconsciously. They say something harsher, more revealing, more reckless. That's when you finally respond, not with emotion, but with precision. One line, clean, controlled, timed. And because of the contrast, it lands harder than anything shouted. This is how savage replies really work. They are not constant. They are selective. You don't swing at every opening. You wait for the moment when the other person is off balance. Calm helps you see that moment clearly. Emotion blinds. Calm clarifies. Remember this rule. The man who can slow the interaction controls it. Speed belongs to panic. Slowness belongs to confidence. If you master nothing else from this monologue, master this. Never let someone else dictate your emotional tempo. If this mindset is clicking for you, comment, "Calm is my weapon," below. Say it once. Let it anchor. Number 4. Questions that cut deeper than statements. Statements invite resistance. Questions invite surrender. This is where most men fail. They talk too much. They explain, they assert, they defend positions that were never theirs to defend. Powerful men don't argue with statements. They interrogate with precision. A well-placed question doesn't just challenge an argument, it collapses it from the inside. Understand this principle deeply. When you make a statement, you carry the burden of proof. When you ask a question, you shift that burden onto them. Now they must think, justify, clarify. And in that process, they expose weaknesses they didn't know they had. You remain calm, observant, in control. They begin working for you without realizing it. Most arguments escalate because both sides are trying to win with force. Questions bypass force entirely. They don't feel aggressive, they feel reasonable, and that's what makes them lethal. A calm question delivered with steady eye contact is psychological pressure disguised as curiosity. It sounds harmless. It isn't. Here's the first blade, the narrowing question. When someone makes a broad accusation or sweeping claim, don't counter it. Narrow it. Ask them to specify. What exactly do you mean? Or which part specifically? Broad claims survive on vagueness. Precision kills them. The moment they're forced to be specific, their confidence drops. They hesitate, they contradict themselves, they realize they were speaking emotionally, not accurately. Then there's the assumption-exposing question. Many attacks hide unspoken assumptions. Your job is to drag those assumptions into the light without sounding hostile. What are you assuming about me here? Or what are you basing that on? This forces them to either admit they're guessing or scramble for evidence they don't have. Either way, their authority erodes. Next is the mirror question, one of the most Machiavellian tools available. You simply reflect their own logic back at them. If they accuse you of being defensive, ask calmly, what would not being defensive look like to you? If they say you're arrogant, ask, how would you prefer I present myself? Now they're defining standards they can't consistently apply. You've turned their accusation into a responsibility they didn't ask for. Questions also allow you to control tempo. Statements push forward. Questions slow things down. Slowness creates dominance. It forces the other person to think instead of react. While they search for words, you stay still. That pause feels heavy, judgmental, powerful. Silence plus a question is often enough to destabilize even confident speakers. There's a darker variation, the incomplete question. You ask something and stop before finishing. So, you're saying that, and then silence. Humans are wired to complete patterns. They'll jump in to fill the gap, often revealing more than they intended. You didn't accuse, you didn't assert, you simply opened a door and let them walk through it. Another brutal tactic is the consequence question. Instead of arguing whether something is right or wrong, ask where it leads. And if everyone did that, what would happen? Or what does that say about your standard? This elevates you above the argument. You're no longer debating content, you're judging implications. That's a higher position of power. Notice the pattern here. You are not trying to sound clever. You are trying to sound unmoved. Calm questions feel like a scalpel. Emotional statements feel like a hammer. Precision always wins, but timing matters. Don't fire questions rapidly like bullets. That feels desperate. Ask one, then wait. Let it sit. Let the discomfort grow. Most people answer too quickly because silence feels like failure. They rush, they over-explain, they contradict themselves. You don't interrupt. You let the unraveling happen naturally. Here's a rule you must internalize. Never rescue your opponent. When they struggle to answer your question, don't rephrase it for their comfort. Don't soften it. Don't help them look better. Silence is the pressure. Let it work. If they ask you to clarify, repeat the question slowly, exactly as before. That repetition signals confidence and control. Questions also protect you from emotional traps. When someone tries to provoke you, Respond with curiosity instead of resistance. What made you say that? Sounds innocent, but it forces introspection. Aggressive people hate introspection. They want reaction. When they don't get it, their aggression turns inward. This is how elite interrogators extract information, not by force, by calm curiosity, by letting people talk themselves into corners. You can do the same in everyday arguments. The goal is not to humiliate openly. The goal is to make the other person realize they've lost control. Here's another layer most don't see. Questions establish hierarchy. The one asking questions frames the conversation. The one answering is reacting. When you ask calmly and selectively, you place yourself above the exchange. You are evaluating, not defending. That alone changes how people perceive you. But don't overuse questions. Power is selective. If you ask too many, you look like you're searching. Ask one that matters, then stop. Let the answer, or lack of one, do the damage. There's also the closing question, which ends arguments cleanly. Instead of trying to have the last word, ask something that makes continuation pointless. Is there anything else you want to add? Or, are you done? Said calmly, not sarcastically. This places the responsibility for continuation on them. If they keep going, they look obsessed. If they stop, you've ended it on your terms. Understand this. Savage replies don't always sound savage. They sound reasonable. That's why they work. They make the other person look unreasonable by contrast. You stay composed. They escalate. The audience, real or imagined, decides who holds power. If you're starting to see how questions can dismantle arguments without aggression, comment, "I ask," they unravel below. Anchor it. Remember, your goal is not to dominate every conversation. It's to be unassailable. Calm questions build an invisible shield around you. Attacks bounce off, accusations dissolve, and slowly, people learn something important about you. You are not easily moved, and you are not easily manipulated. In the next section, you'll learn how to end arguments permanently, how to leave interactions in a way that lingers in the other person's mind long after you've walked away. Stay cold, stay deliberate. Number 5. How to end arguments so they never restart. Most men think winning an argument means landing the last blow. That's amateur thinking. The real objective is not to win loudly. It's to end the conflict permanently, to leave the other person replaying the moment in their head while you move on untouched. Power is not proven by how hard you strike, but by how cleanly you disengage. Here's the truth most people won't accept. Arguments don't continue because of disagreement. They continue because of unresolved emotional hooks. Someone wants validation. Someone wants dominance. Someone wants reaction. If you remove the hook, the argument dies. Your job is not to overpower. It's to deny continuation. The most savage endings are quiet, calm, almost anticlimactic. That's what makes them unforgettable. Understand this principle first. Whoever wants the argument more is already weaker. Desire is leverage. Need is exposure. When you communicate, even subtly, that you don't need this exchange to continue, the power dynamic flips instantly. The other person starts chasing closure. You become the one being pursued. One of the strongest ways to end an argument is controlled agreement. This confuses aggressive minds. When someone attacks you expecting resistance and you calmly say, "That's your perspective," you don't validate them, but you don't fight either. You acknowledge without submitting. There's nothing to push against. Their momentum dies mid-swing. Another lethal closer is final framing. You calmly summarize the interaction in a way that positions you above it. "We clearly see this differently," or "We're not going to agree on this," delivered without frustration. This reframes the conflict as a matter of incompatibility, not victory. It signals maturity, not retreat. The argument ends because there's nowhere left to go. Then there's the exit line, short, neutral, and absolute. "I'm done discussing this." No explanation, no justification, just a statement of boundary. Weak men feel guilty setting boundaries. Strong men treat them as normal. When said calmly, this line communicates finality. Any attempt to continue after that makes the other person look obsessive. Here's something crucial. Never end an argument emotionally. Never storm off. Never raise your voice at the end. That leaves unfinished energy. Calm closure denies satisfaction. It leaves the other person with unresolved tension. And unresolved tension turns inward. They replay, they rethink, they doubt. You live rent-free in their mind while you're already gone. Another powerful technique is delayed disengagement. Instead of ending immediately, you slow the exchange until it collapses naturally. Your replies get shorter, your tone flattens, your interest visibly fades. Humans are sensitive to attention. When they feel it slipping, they either escalate or withdraw. If they escalate, you disengage cleanly. If they withdraw, the argument dies without drama. Silence is also an ending, but only when it's intentional. Ghosting mid-argument can be powerful if done from a place of composure, not avoidance. When someone sends a long, emotional message and you don't reply at all, the silence becomes the response. But this only works if you've already established that you are capable of engagement. Silence from a weak man looks like fear. Silence from a composed man looks like judgment. There's also the status exit. You end the interaction by shifting attention elsewhere. Another task, another person, another priority. "I've got something to handle," said calmly, implies your life is full and moving forward. You don't pause your world for conflict. That subtle message is devastating to someone trying to pull you into theirs. Here's a darker truth. Some people argue not to resolve issues but to extract energy. They feed on reaction, on chaos, on emotional engagement. The only way to beat them is starvation. When you stop feeding the interaction, it withers. This is not avoidance. This is strategic disengagement. Elite power players understand this deeply. They don't burn bridges loudly. They let bridges decay quietly. They don't announce exits. They just stop showing up emotionally. And people feel that absence more than any insult. You must also learn to leave ambiguity. Don't over-clarify your position at the end. Don't tie everything neatly. Ambiguity creates psychological residue. When someone isn't sure how you feel, they keep thinking about it. Certainty gives closure. Ambiguity creates dominance. Here's an example. Instead of saying, "You're wrong and here's why," you say, "I'll think about what you said." Calm, neutral, non-committal. This sounds polite, but it's powerful. It signals evaluation, not agreement. They don't know where they stand. You've ended the argument without conceding anything. Another advanced closer is value mismatch framing. "That's not how I operate," or "That's not a standard I work with." You're not attacking them. You're defining yourself. This places the disagreement at the level of values, not opinions. Values are not argued. They are chosen. The conversation ends because it's no longer debatable. Remember this rule. Never seek emotional victory at the end. Emotional victory is short-lived. Psychological dominance lasts. When you leave calm, controlled, and uninterested in continuation, you win by default. This is why Machiavellian power favors restraint over aggression. Aggression burns energy and reveals intent. Restraint conserves energy and conceals strategy. The man who can walk away without proving himself is dangerous because he doesn't need witnesses. Here's something important. How you exit becomes your reputation. People remember how interactions end more than how they begin. If you consistently end arguments calmly and decisively, people learn something about you. They can't drag you into chaos. They either meet you at your level or avoid conflict entirely. And that's the real goal. Not to win every argument, but to reach a point where arguments rarely start with you at all. If you're ready to stop chasing the last word and start controlling the last moment, comment, "I decide when it ends," below. Make that identity public. Number 6, let your reputation speak before you do. There comes a level where arguments don't reach you anymore, not because you avoid them, but because people hesitate before starting them. This is the stage most men never reach because they're too focused on winning moments instead of building presence. True power in conversation isn't reactive, it's anticipatory. It exists before a single word is spoken. Reputation is delayed dominance. Every calm exit, every composed reply, Every refusal to chase chaos accumulates. People notice patterns even when they don't consciously admit it. They learn who explodes and who observes, who reacts and who decides, and slowly, instinctively, they adjust their behavior around you. Most men sabotage this by inconsistency. One day they're calm, the next day emotional. One argument they're stoic, the next they're defensive. That inconsistency invites testing. Humans test boundaries they don't understand. But when your responses become predictable in one way, calm, controlled, selective, people stop testing. They already know the outcome. Here's the rule: never let them see you scramble. You can lose a point, you can concede a fact, but never lose composure. Composure is the currency of authority. Once it's gone, everything else weakens. People forgive being wrong. They don't forget being rattled. Reputation is built not in big confrontations, but in small ones. Casual disrespect, offhand remarks, subtle challenges. When you handle these moments with quiet firmness, word spreads without words. People talk. They say things like, "He doesn't react," or "He's hard to read," or "Arguing with him goes nowhere." Those are compliments in the language of power. Another truth most men miss: you don't need to dominate everyone. You only need to establish that you can. Once that perception exists, restraint becomes even more powerful. You speak less, you respond slower, you disengage earlier, and paradoxically, your influence increases. This is where masculine stoicism turns into psychological gravity. You don't chase conversations. Conversations orbit you. People wait for your reaction. Your silence carries meaning. Your approval becomes scarce. Scarcity creates value. Value creates influence. There's also something deeply unsettling about a man who doesn't need to correct others. When someone says something wrong and you don't rush to fix it, it implies confidence. It implies that your identity isn't threatened by misinformation. You don't fight for dominance. You assume it. That assumption is contagious. Let me be clear. This is not about arrogance. Arrogance needs validation. This is about self-containment. You know who you are. You know what you stand for. You don't need to perform intelligence or strength. You let others reveal theirs. This is why powerful men often seem indifferent in debates. It's not because they lack opinions. It's because they choose when expression is worth the cost. Every response has a cost: energy, exposure, commitment. When you start calculating cost, you stop wasting words. Here's a technique that reinforces reputation silently: selective engagement. You don't respond to everyone. You don't correct every mistake. You don't acknowledge every challenge. When you do speak, it feels deliberate, measured, final. People lean in because they sense weight behind your words. Contrast this with men who argue constantly. They're always available, always reactive, always explaining. Familiarity breeds dismissal, but restraint breeds respect. There's also the power of being misunderstood temporarily. Weak men rush to clarify. Strong men let misunderstandings sit if clarification offers no strategic advantage. Time often corrects perception better than argument, and even if it doesn't, your peace remains intact. That alone is victory. Your reputation also benefits from how you treat defeat. When you lose an argument or concede a point calmly, without bitterness or excuses, you gain credibility. People trust men who can absorb loss without collapsing. Ironically, this makes your future arguments more persuasive because you're not seen as someone who fights blindly. Here's the darker layer. Once your reputation solidifies, people start self-censoring around you. They soften tone, they choose words carefully, they hesitate. That hesitation is power transferred. You didn't demand it. You earned it through consistency. And consistency is the real secret. Not clever lines, not savage insults. Consistency of state. Calm under pressure, neutral under attack, controlled under provocation. Over time, this becomes intimidating, not because it's aggressive, but because it's unreadable. People fear what they can't predict. They fear men who don't react the way they expect. When insults don't land, when provocations fail, when emotional hooks don't catch, frustration turns into avoidance, and avoidance is respect in disguise. You must also accept this. As your reputation grows, fewer people will like you. That's normal. Calm dominance threatens insecure egos. They'll label you cold, arrogant, detached. Let them. Labels are cheaper than self-reflection. You don't need mass approval, you need position. This is where Machiavellian realism matters. You're not here to be liked, you're here to be unmovable. Likability fluctuates, position endures. Remember, your silence today shapes tomorrow's interactions. Every time you choose restraint over reaction, you invest in future leverage. Every time you walk away cleanly, you raise the cost of challenging you again. If you're ready to stop proving yourself and start letting presence do the work, comment, "My presence speaks first," below. Lock it in. In the next section, we'll sharpen everything you've learned into rapid-fire techniques. How to deliver short, devastating replies when speech is unavoidable, and how to do it without ever lowering yourself. Stay steady, stay disciplined. Part 7. Let your reputation speak before you do. There comes a level where arguments don't reach you anymore, not because you avoid them, but because people hesitate before starting them. This is the stage most men never reach because they're too focused on winning moments instead of building presence. True power in conversation isn't reactive, it's anticipatory. It exists before a single word is spoken. Reputation is delayed dominance. Every calm exit, every composed reply, every refusal to chase chaos accumulates. People notice patterns even when they don't consciously admit it. They learn who explodes and who observes, who reacts and who decides. And slowly, instinctively, they adjust their behavior around you. Most men sabotage this by inconsistency. One day they're calm, the next day emotional. One argument they're stoic, the next they're defensive. That inconsistency invites testing. Humans test boundaries they don't understand. But when your responses become predictable in one way, calm, controlled, selective, people stop testing. They already know the outcome. Here's the rule. Never let them see you scramble. You can lose a point, you can concede a fact, but never lose composure. Composure is the currency of authority. Once it's gone, everything else weakens. People forgive being wrong. They don't forget being rattled. Reputation is built not in big confrontations, but in small ones. Casual disrespect, offhand remarks, subtle challenges. When you handle these moments with quiet firmness, word spreads without words. People talk. They say things like, "He doesn't react," or "He's hard to read," or "Arguing with him goes nowhere." Those are compliments in the language of power. Another truth most men miss: you don't need to dominate everyone. You only need to establish that you can. Once that perception exists, restraint becomes even more powerful. You speak less, you respond slower, you disengage earlier, and paradoxically, your influence increases. This is where masculine stoicism turns into psychological gravity. You don't chase conversations. Conversations orbit you. People wait for your reaction. Your silence carries meaning. Your approval becomes scarce. Scarcity creates value. Value creates influence. There's also something deeply unsettling about a man who doesn't need to correct others. When someone says something wrong and you don't rush to fix it, it implies confidence. It implies that your identity isn't threatened by misinformation. You don't fight for dominance, you assume it. That assumption is contagious. Let me be clear. This is not about arrogance. Arrogance needs validation. This is about self-containment. You know who you are. You know what you stand for. You don't need to perform intelligence or strength. You let others reveal theirs. This is why powerful men often seem indifferent in debates. It's not because they lack opinions. It's because they choose when expression is worth the cost. Every response has a cost: energy, exposure, commitment. When you start calculating cost, you stop wasting words. Here's a technique that reinforces reputation silently: selective engagement. You don't respond to everyone. You don't correct every mistake. You don't acknowledge every challenge. When you do speak, it feels deliberate. measured, final. People lean in because they sense weight behind your words. Contrast this with men who argue constantly. They're always available, always reactive, always explaining. Familiarity breeds dismissal, but restraint breeds respect. There's also the power of being misunderstood temporarily. Weak men rush to clarify. Strong men let misunderstanding sit if clarification offers no strategic advantage. Time often corrects perception better than argument, and even if it doesn't, your peace remains intact. That alone is victory. Your reputation also benefits from how you treat defeat. When you lose an argument or concede a point calmly, without bitterness or excuses, you gain credibility. People trust men who can absorb loss without collapsing. Ironically, this makes your future arguments more persuasive because you're not seen as someone who fights blindly. Here's the darker layer. Once your reputation solidifies, people start self-censoring around you. They soften tone. They choose words carefully. They hesitate. That hesitation is power transferred. You didn't demand it. You earned it through consistency. And consistency is the real secret. Not clever lines, not savage insults. Consistency of state, calm under pressure, neutral under attack, controlled under provocation. Over time, this becomes intimidating, not because it's aggressive, but because it's unreadable. People fear what they can't predict. They fear men who don't react the way they expect. When insults don't land, when provocations fail, when emotional hooks don't catch, frustration turns into avoidance, and avoidance is respect in disguise. You must also accept this. As your reputation grows, fewer people will like you. That's normal. Calm dominance threatens insecure egos. They'll label you cold, arrogant, detached. Let them. Labels are cheaper than self-reflection. You don't need mass approval. You need position. This is where Machiavellian realism matters. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be unmovable. Likability fluctuates. Position endures. Remember, your silence today shapes tomorrow's interactions. Every time you choose restraint over reaction, you invest in future leverage. Every time you walk away cleanly, you raise the cost of challenging you again. If you're ready to stop proving yourself and start letting presence do the work, comment, "My presence speaks first," below. Lock it in. In the next section, we'll sharpen everything you've learned into rapid-fire techniques. How to deliver short, devastating replies when speech is unavoidable, and how to do it without ever lowering yourself. Stay steady, stay disciplined. Number 7. Short replies that leave long damage. There will be moments when silence isn't the right move, moments when you must speak, when disengagement would look like avoidance, and calm observation alone isn't enough. This is where most men panic. They either say too much or say the wrong thing. Power, however, knows how to strike briefly. Short replies are dangerous when delivered correctly, not because they're loud, not because they're clever, but because they leave no room to grab onto. Long explanations invite counterattacks. Short replies end pathways. They feel final. They feel deliberate. They feel like judgment. Here's the mindset you must adopt. When you speak, your words should close doors, not open debates. The first rule of savage brevity is this: never explain your position unless it serves you. Explanation signals investment. Investment signals vulnerability. The more you explain, the more material you give the other person to work with. A short reply starves them. For example, when someone challenges your decision, instead of explaining your reasoning, you say, "That's the decision." Calm, flat, no emotion, no invitation. The conversation stops because there's nothing to push against. They're left arguing with reality, not you. Another powerful short reply is disengaged certainty. Lines like, "I'm comfortable with that," or "That works for me," shut down emotional manipulation instantly. You're not asking permission. You're not seeking agreement. You're stating internal alignment. People can argue facts, but they can't argue your comfort. Here's something most people don't understand. Confidence isn't volume. It's lack of negotiation. When your tone suggests finality, people feel it. Even if they disagree, they sense resistance is costly. Then there's the mirror line. Short, clean, and unsettling. When someone says something disrespectful, you respond with, "That's what you chose to say." You're not offended, you're not angry, you're observing. That observation turns the spotlight back on them. Now they're judged, not by you, but by the situation itself. Another devastating short reply is non-endorsement. "I don't see it that way." That's it. No follow-up, no argument. You haven't attacked their view, you've simply declined it. This forces them to either escalate emotionally or let it go. Either way, you remain composed. Short replies also work because they create asymmetry. The other person talks a lot. You don't. Humans instinctively assign higher status to the person who needs fewer words. It feels like authority, like restraint, like control. But here's the key. You must pair short replies with stillness. No nervous movements, no defensive posture. Stillness amplifies brevity. A short sentence delivered with a steady body feels heavy. The same sentence delivered with fidgeting feels weak. There's also the power of delayed brevity. You let them speak. You let them over-explain. You let them reveal emotion. And then, after a pause, you reply with one sentence. That contrast does more damage than any insult ever could. For example, after a long accusation, you pause, then say, "That's not accurate." Silence. That's it. No justification. Now the burden shifts back to them. They feel exposed. They feel uncertain. You didn't defend. You evaluated. Short replies also protect your energy. They keep you from getting dragged into circular debates. They help you maintain internal calm. The more you talk, the more emotionally invested you become. The less you talk, the more detached you stay. Here's a dangerous truth. Most arguments aren't about truth. They're about emotional discharge. Short replies deny discharge. They frustrate people who want reaction. Over time, those people stop targeting you. You're no longer a source of emotional reward. Another category of short reply is boundary declaration. That's not acceptable. No insult, no justification, just a boundary. People may test boundaries once or twice, but clear boundaries delivered calmly are respected, even if not liked. Notice something important. None of these replies are flashy. None are aggressive. None are insulting. That's intentional. Flashiness seeks attention. Aggression seeks dominance. Calm brevity assumes dominance. You must also learn what not to say. Never say, "Let me explain." Never say, "You're misunderstanding me." Never say, "That's not what I meant." These phrases signal weakness because they give the other person power over your meaning. Strong men don't rush to correct perception unless it benefits them. Here's a subtle but lethal short reply. "If you say so." Delivered neutrally, not sarcastically. This line ends arguments because it refuses to validate or challenge. It communicates indifference to persuasion. The other person feels dismissed, but can't accuse you of aggression. Short replies also train people how to treat you. When they realize they won't get long emotional exchanges, they adapt. They either raise their level or disengage. Both outcomes benefit you. But restraint requires discipline. Your ego will want to speak. It will want to prove intelligence. Resist that urge. The need to prove is the enemy of power. Power doesn't need to perform. Here's a question to anchor this. What happens if I say nothing more? Often the answer is nothing bad. The argument fades, the tension dissolves, and you walk away intact. If you're starting to feel the strength of speaking less and meaning more, comment, "Few words, heavy weight." Let it sink in. Remember this, savage replies are not about verbal violence. They're about verbal economy, precision over excess, control over expression, calm over chaos. In the final sections ahead, we'll bring everything together, how to combine silence, calm, questions, reputation, and brevity into a single mindset that makes you untouchable in any verbal exchange. Now listen carefully. Everything you've learned here points to one truth. Real power is not loud, fast, or emotional. It is calm. It is selective. It is disciplined. Anyone can argue. Anyone can insult. Anyone can react. Very few can stay composed, strategic, and unmoved when pressure hits. That's why most people stay predictable, and why a rare few become untouchable. You no longer need to win every argument. You don't need the last word. You don't need approval, validation, or applause. The moment you stop needing those things, your words change, your silence changes, your presence changes, and people feel it before they understand it. From now on, you control the frame. You decide when to speak and when to withhold. You let others reveal themselves while you remain unreadable. You don't chase respect. You attract it through consistency, restraint, and calm authority. Arguments no longer drain you. They expose others. This is the Machiavellian advantage. Not cruelty, not chaos, but clarity, control, and cold awareness of human nature. Remember, every time you choose calm over reaction, you invest in power. Every time you ask instead of explain, you gain leverage. Every time you walk away cleanly, you leave an imprint that lingers longer than any insult ever could. If this monologue sharpened your mind, mark your identity now. Comment, "Untouchable by design," below. Say it once. Mean it. And if you want more content like this, content that trains your mindset, sharpens your psychology, and builds quiet dominance, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Machiavellian Mind, and turn on notifications so you never miss what gives you an edge. Stay cold, stay deliberate, and remember, power doesn't announce itself, it waits.